Hi everyone, and welcome back. Sorry for the lack of content in recent weeks, but I've been quite busy. So, I've wanted to do this for a while now, a comparison video or a series of videos between Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation. But I don't want to do a standard comparison where I just look at the hardware and compare them. Instead, I want to compare different games in different genres for both consoles. So for instance, I want to compare the first fighting game released on each console and compare them, and the first racing game on each console, and so on. So in this very first episode, I want to compare the two first fighting games for both consoles. And for the Sega Saturn, it was the Virtua Fighter. This game was a launch game released on the 22nd of November 1994 in Japan, and it was released as a launch game, as I mentioned, for the Sega Saturn. And for the Sony PlayStation, the first fighting game released for the console, or the first 3D fighting game I would say, is the Battle Arena Toshinden. So this was released on the 1st of January in 1995 in Japan, just a few weeks after the launch of the Sony PlayStation in Japan. Okay, so this is Virtua Fighter on the Sega Saturn. And as I mentioned, this was a launch game in Japan. The thing is that Sega had to rush to get this released for the Saturn launch in Japan, and I remember quite a few game magazines, when they reviewed this, they complained about the graphics, that it falls short compared to the arcade. And of course, I mean, this was a high-end arcade system in the arcades, so I mean, it was obvious that you couldn't get the exact arcade experience at home, but still the reviewers, they complain about the flickering and the lack of polygons in the character models. And yeah, I mean the Saturn is not a high-end arcade board, but yeah, you can see that the floor tiles are flickering, but still, now looking back, playing it now and looking back at it, I think it still holds up quite well. I mean, it's a fast game, it's very challenging, and you get, I would say you get an arcade experience at home. You get two-player mode, so it's a fast-paced game. The music score is the same as in arcades, so I think after all these years, this still holds up really well. Okay, so this is Battle Arena Toshinden on the Sony PlayStation. As I mentioned, this was released on January 1st in Japan, 1995. So this was the first 3D polygon game released for the Sony PlayStation. So this was the main challenger to Sega Saturn's Virtua Fighter. And I mean, you can instantly tell that this is a really nice looking game. And the reason I chose Ellis was because I remember back in 1995 when I first saw this game, I was shocked because just look at her dress. It's totally transparent, and we hadn't seen anything like that in the home consoles at that time. The graphical effects, the transparency effects, and the textured characters, it was amazing back then. And a lot of the gaming journalists, they were totally floored by this game, how good it looked. But here's the thing, once you start digging into this game, you kind of start seeing the flaws of this game. So to begin with, the controller is not very good. It's quite a stiff controls, and the characters are. The main problem are the characters. They're kind of stiff. So sometimes they miss a punch or a kick, and they don't instantly turn their head, and they just kind of like punch or kick in thin air, and it looks kind of awkward. So yeah, so it's quite a stiff game. But as I mentioned, back in 1995, seeing this, I mean, it was amazing how good it looked back then. So yeah, so this was PlayStation's answer to Virtua Fighter. But it wasn't an exclusive game, because Battle Arena Toshinden was released for the Sega Saturn later on. And yeah. So comparing these two games now, after almost 30 years since they were released, which one is the winner? Well, I would say that gameplay-wise, Virtua Fighter still plays better than Toshinden. It's a more fun game, it's more arcadey. This hasn't aged as well as Virtua Fighter, I would say. The graphics are really good, the soundtrack is fantastic actually, but the gameplay is very shallow and weak. So when I compare them now, I would say that Virtua Fighter is the winner when it comes to 3D fighting games for the 32-bit generation. Yeah, so Virtua Fighter takes home the first score, and I'll see you next time when we take a look at the first racing games for Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation. And if you have any comment suggestions or any advice, just drop it in the comments section, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.